first question has to do with education, and Molly, we will start with you and then go to Eric and then to Elizabeth. With school funding not keeping up with inflation, what can we do to attract quality teachers to education in Iowa? Molly, you're up.
That is a very hot topic in our schools. You know, we have tried and we're working towards getting better pay, obviously, for our teachers, and our unions have worked diligently across the state to make sure that teachers are getting as much as they can get them from what the state is giving us. So if the state is not going to fully fund, we have to look at other ways to attract teachers. Some of that might be the tuition costs for them to go to school. Maybe we find ways that we can reimburse them for that funding to help them go to school. Maybe we do have some programs that are allowing people to move from the para area into education, and they're doing that through providing some education credits so that they can work in our schools, in our classrooms, like in our special ed classroom. Our parents are doing this, and go to school to receive their teacher's degree. We're going to kind of smooth that way in. There are a lot of things that we have to do, and the first thing we have to do is we have to get fully funded schools, and we have to make sure that our public money stay in public schools so that we can do that.
So one thing that always gets mentioned when we talk about how to attract teachers is salary. However, I think that we need to shift away a little bit from that and talk about how do we professionalize the profession. So often right now, teachers are doing a lot of things other than just teaching in a classroom. They become social workers, they become mental health counselors, they sometimes become substance abuse counselors. They're not trained, nor are they certified in any of that. Our public schools are the hub of a community. They help students. When we help students, we help educators. When we help educators, we ultimately help students. As a 20-year veteran in public schools and teaching special education, I know what the workload is. We need to lower class sizes so that educators can see the success stories in their classrooms. We need to be putting in mental health counselors in our schools so that when a student is having a particular crisis in the classroom, we have somebody that we can call that can react to that crisis right now. A student can't wait 2 hours, can't wait 2 days, can't wait 2 months to see somebody. They need to see somebody right now. And if we can get that person to see that counselor, the educator who is trained in pedagogy can teach their students.
It's a little intimidating to follow two teachers on this topic. Well, at least I had a school board, so I have a little bit of experience. And I will say that I was on the finance committee for the school board, so financing in the public school is a very complicated topic, and people sometimes think you can just pay that, you got a budget, why aren't you paying? But the way that the money is allocated is very specific. It has to come out of general fund, that 80% of that is salary, so really if we want to raise teacher pay, we have to give the schools more money. There's just no other way to do it. I also think about the mental health issues and the aspects of the pressures that we're putting on teachers these days as opposed to just teaching. I recently was exposed to the fact that Kids First in Cedar Rapids, the nonprofit, is sending in arbitrators and trainers so that when the kids have conflict, they're not necessarily having to call in police but teaching the kids kind of how to resolve. And if you haven't heard about that program, it's amazing. But again, another opportunity to take some pressure off teachers about the conflict in their classes and provide the kids with an opportunity to figure out how to work things out amongst them. Very impressive program. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to put it on my Facebook page. It's phenomenal. So besides what else has been mentioned, I think we've got a lot to do. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go with the topics that seem to be in the news and are the questions people have. And so this next question is on abortion, and we'll start with Eric and then Elizabeth and then Molly. And the question is, will anyone introduce a bill to make abortion legal in Iowa?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's definitely, the Iowa Democratic Caucus supports a woman's right to choose. As a husband and as a father of 3 daughters, there is no way that I want anybody making a healthcare decision, regardless of what it is, for my family, for my daughters, for me, for my wife. We know how small doctors' offices are when we go into the exam room. There certainly isn't room for a politician. And we need to ensure that those very personal decisions are made with the medical professional, the patient, and their family, or whomever else they choose. And I doubt they would choose any of us sitting in the Des Moines legislature. So the Iowa House Democrats, I think I can speak for the Iowa Senate Democrats, will propose legislation to ensure that women in the state of Iowa have the autonomy to make their own healthcare decisions.
I can't believe that we're actually talking about this. I can't believe that in this country, of all the things that we should be talking about, we've got big problems. We've got massive problems, and we're talking about reproductive rights. I'm insulted. As a woman, I'm insulted. So I think I will keep this very simple. It's a woman's right, and it's a medical decision, and absolutely we should codify it. I have nothing else to say about it, honestly.
As Elizabeth said, it is the women's right. It is a right. Healthcare is a right, and this is healthcare. So reproductive healthcare, just like being healthcare, has no business being discussed by anyone outside of that doctor's office with the family and or just the woman. It's her choice. So we do have some major issues with this, and as I kind of stated in my opening, our governor is fighting to do this, even though the majority of Iowans do not want this. I believe we're at 68% say no to any bans, and yet she's still pushing this. So I have written in my article in the Gazette, as well as put on Facebook, that I will help put out a bill that would codify this as a right. And healthcare is a right. Just want to keep saying that. Healthcare is a right. Reproductive healthcare is healthcare.
All right, on this next question, I'll start with Ms. Wilson, and I'll follow up on the theme of healthcare. How do you hope to promote covering the loss of hundreds of nurses? The U of I healthcare has almost 300 openings. Mercy and St. Luke's have many open nursing spots. So somewhat similar to education in Iowa in terms of lack of appealing to the professionals we need. Ms. Wilson?
You know, I didn't know a lot about the nursing profession prior to COVID, and I think we all got exposed to the pressures put upon nurses in terms of what they have to handle, the caseloads that the number of patients, the number of beds that they are having to take care of. And I had some personal experience. I've had actually 2 surgeries this year, and I have another knee replacement scheduled for the day after the election. So I got to spend some time with nurses, and it was really interesting. The healthcare systems, the hospitals, have made money. They're building more buildings. They have money. They have funding, right? So why are we putting all the extra pressure on nurses when I'd love to see the financing. I'm a numbers person. I would like to see why we're investing in more facilities as opposed to paying these nurses what they deserve, as well as reducing their caseloads so that they, as well as the patients, are getting the best care. I had nurses tell me that they don't like to have to call the doctors on call because they can get some grief and some feedback from having to call them in the middle of the night. And I think with everything else they have on their plate, and that in addition, I do like this new program I've heard about Kirkwood working with Mount Mercy to have 3 years to get your RN. You can go 3 years to Kirkwood, and then you go on to Mount Mercy. That should help reduce costs, but I think we need to provide some funding to back that up as well. Thank you.
Much like education, nurses also get very little respect, and so it's a cultural change that we need to make in this country for essential workers. We found that out during COVID. There are a lot of people who are essential to make sure that this country continues to run, and one of them is the healthcare field. And if our nurses aren't treated as a professional group, then they feel, it's like education, they want to leave. They have too much on their backs, too much to hold burdens, just like the schools. They're dealing with mental health on top of the actual illness that they may be treating, or maybe they're just treating mental illness that they are not trained to treat because they've been brought into the emergency room. So we have to change the way we think about our nursing profession, just like we do for education, and as Elizabeth said, to make sure that we also make it more appealing to be able to get that degree without costing so much money that they have so much debt that they can't pay out of it. Another thing that I would like to add on to, our hospitals are spending an extraordinary amount of money on the nurses that travel. They cost 3 times more than hiring nurses, and we could pay our nurses more and not have so many traveling nurses who are making so much money brought into Iowa.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach on this, and I agree that we need to professionalize professions. However, I think we need to respect Iowans. And if we can make Iowa a place where individuals want to live and work and play and invest in our people, people want to move to our state, people want to get educated in our state, and people want to stay in our state. That's what we need to focus on. Right now, Iowa is 49th out of 50 in mental health in the country. That's ridiculous. Just this week, I went and visited the Mental Health Institute in Independence and checked to see and looked at the work that they're doing there. I visited the Medical Classification Center at the Oakdale campus last week. There's so much we need to do for Iowans. We want to ensure, when my daughters, we've got a 12-year-old daughter who's in 7th grade and twins who are 9 and in 3rd grade. And like every parent, I want to ensure, and that's one of the reasons I'm running, I want to ensure that we have a state that they want to stay in when they can make that decision on their own. And right now, we're lacking in a lot of areas. And if we can make it a state that people want to come to and people want to stay in, investing in our public schools, investing in our small towns, and investing in the people of Iowa, people will come here and people will stay here.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll start with Molly. And sticking with some hot topics, it's about the gun amendment. And you hopefully are aware that on the ballot will be a proposal, a question, whether or not to change Iowa's constitution related to guns. And it looks like the Second Amendment with some additional language, including the term strict scrutiny. So the question is, where do you stand on the gun amendment? We all have the opportunity to vote on this election, and why? Molly?
That is very easy. You all should vote no on this. As far as that gun amendment goes, I'm going to kind of take a step back. It isn't the Second Amendment with some extra language. It is the Second Amendment on steroids. This amendment is scary because it ties the hands of the legislature, it ties the hands of the courts for any future common sense gun laws. We already know that our area, just in Lynn County, has had an uptick in gun use and deaths among our youth. I've had students who have passed away on the streets because they were shot. This is something that is awful that is happening, and we don't need to have more accessibility to guns for anyone. I am for the Second Amendment, absolutely, but the actual wording that we have in our national constitution. And I would like to see that in our constitution in Iowa, but not this strict scrutiny. So to make it very quick and short, just vote no.
Last year, Iowa House Democrats proposed an amendment that would put the United States Constitution into the Constitution in the state of Iowa. Iowa Democrats support the Second Amendment. I say support the Second Amendment and vote no on this ballot initiative. Strict scrutiny does change everything. We know that in death by suicide, over 70% are a result of guns. We know that violent crime often is a result of gun usage. I am a candidate who supports common sense gun legislation. Again, as I mentioned in the last question, we need to ensure that Iowa is a state where people want to live, work, and play. And feeling safe where you live, feeling safe where you work is a huge component of that. Again, support the Second Amendment, vote no on the ballot initiative.
I don't think I really can say anything that hasn't been said, so hoping to get to even broader topics, I'm going to limit my time and just agree with everything that's been said. I'm a strong Second Amendment proponent. I'd love to see it codified in the Constitution in Iowa, and vote no. Thank you.
All right, on our next question related to budget, we'll start with Dr. Jurdy. Iowa has a budget surplus affected also by federal spending programs. How should this surplus be used? How should the budget surplus be used?
We hear every legislative session, that Iowa has a budget surplus. We've got X amount of dollars in the reserves. I would argue that Iowa does not currently have a budget surplus. Iowa currently does not have anything in the reserves unless we're funding the programs that need to be funded. We cannot continue to underfund programs. We can't continue to being able to not fund, not even underfund, but not fund particular programs that have been legislated and yet say that we have a budget surplus. Last year, as I'm sure you're well aware, the legislative branch and the executive branch in the state of Iowa passed a massive tax cut. Democrats are not opposed to tax cuts, but we offered an amendment that would have started those tax cuts at the lowest level earners and worked their way up to the highest level earners, rather than starting with our highest earners in the state of Iowa, and eventually those of us that are middle class or lower class will see the tax breaks. It's backwards. When we get tax breaks, we spend it. When the wealthiest Iowans get tax breaks, they put it into a trust fund. That does nothing to stimulate the economy.
One of the, this second part of my career, I have an accounting business, I do payroll, I do taxes. I've been very disappointed to watch, especially as a lot of this money has come through, how it's affected my clients. I have a lot of S corps, so they don't get taxed at the corporate level, they get taxed on their individual tax levels. And they're not doing better. We don't have tax cuts in place that are helping them. So when we give tax breaks to corporations, this whole trickle-down theory that we had at a federal level for a long time, we're well aware, we all know that doesn't work. You give the corporations a tax break, you'd like to think they're gonna flow that onto their employees, but history has shown us that that's not the way that it works. Yet that's what we've done in Iowa. I'd like to see a lot more tax breaks for small businesses, and again, as Eric's talking about, I want to see Iowa kids want to stay here, want to invest in businesses, bring high-tech jobs, bring creative, new, innovative businesses here, and thrive here. And I think that will happen if we work hard to put those kinds of tax breaks in place that will help them. Thank you.
Our tax bill last year, I can just give you some statistics real quick. We have over 557,000 Iowans who will not receive a dime because they don't make enough to get a return. We have over 100,000 middle-class Iowans who might see $11 a week. So it just keeps going up. There are over 3,000 millionaires here in Iowa that are going to see $1,300 a week when they do their taxes next year. So we know this is not for most of us. This is for the wealthy. And so given our surplus, we have done a disservice to the people. And we want to make sure, at least that's what the Democrats are talking about, we want to put people first. Do we want corporations to thrive? Absolutely, they need to thrive. We need those businesses. We need those jobs. But as they have produced record profits, they've stagnant wages. And that is not helping the people. So I would make sure that we are making sure small businesses are getting some of those breaks because they employ the majority of Iowans. I would make sure that our schools are funded. I would make sure that Medicaid is funded. There are so many things that I would make sure we utilize that money for. When we don't do that, and when we don't use that money, we aren't getting bridges, we aren't getting broadband, we aren't getting things that people need.
Our next question is on environment, and Molly, oh, Elizabeth, sorry, no, we covered it.
I started on what?
Easter, sorry, I'm losing track, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry, then I lost the question.
So the question has to do with the state surplus. Iowa has a budget surplus.
I did answer.
Yeah, yeah. So our next question, Elizabeth goes first, on environment. What state laws or strategies are needed to improve our water quality in Iowa?
I am going to say that this is a topic that I will be researching, and it's not a topic I feel very well versed in at this point, so I would offer you that I will continue to read more about this and study and talk to people and talk to experts. I don't feel like I have a solid answer on this one, so I'll pass.
So this is, you know, kind of a hot topic in Iowa because we do have issues. We've heard in the news of the amoeba, which is down in the southwest corner, or the bacteria in our lakes and our streams. Number one, we need to work on our CAFOs. We have a grid that has gone awry. There are so many that were not monitored, and because of that, we have some water quality issues. We also need to look at farming. You know, how are we farming from corner to corner right up to the stream? Do we have buffers in between to kind of filter out some of that fertilizer? I am not a farmer, but we need our farmers, and so we need to find a way to coexist with farming because we need the food, we need the ethanol, and it is a vital part of Iowa's economic growth. So we need to find a way to make sure that people are healthy and getting the water that they need and can recreate in that water as well, and still have our farms and have them be viable and doing well. So it is a fine line, but we can do that, but we do need to work with the farmers and the rural communities to do so.
Yeah, one of the committees that I have served on in the last 2 years in the Iowa legislature, I was actually a ranking member of the House Agricultural Committee. And there's a lot that needs to happen with clean water in Iowa, and I think that we're all aware of that. I think everybody is aware of that. What people are willing to do about that is where we vary. And you know, in the summer particularly, we're made aware of it when you see on the news, these lakes have warnings. Don't swim in this lake because of fecal matter, because of invasive species. It needs to be addressed. And we can do that not fighting our agricultural community, but ultimately working with our agricultural community. They have to be willing to do it. We have to be willing to work with them. There's an organization just north of the Tuma Soccer Complex, and the name is escaping me right now. They work on sustainable farming, and they're working with farmers with cover crops and things like that to ensure that our topsoil isn't flowing into the river. You know, I know a farmer in western Iowa, they cannot drink their own water because of the pesticides and the fertilizer that they put into their fields for the last century, and now they don't have drinking water on their own farm. They have to buy bottled water. That is a huge red flag that we need to address.
All right, I've lost track, but is it Molly's turn to go first? So this will be our last question, and then we will do closing comments. So, renewable energy. What are your thoughts on expanding renewable energy in Iowa?
Well, there's been some big topics on this, between solar and wind farms and even the CO2 pipelines. The solar projects, I know that have, some people have had issues with this, but I am for the solar projects. I believe that they will help Iowa, they will help grow that particular area in Halo and down in Coggin as well. Wind farms, we've always been pretty high in the nation as far as, I think we're at 30% of ours comes from wind at this point. And so it's good for Iowa, it's good for jobs, it's good for the economy, and it's good for our air that we breathe and the water that we drink. And the more we do, the better it is for all of us. So I am totally for this, and hope that we continue to increase those numbers.
Thanks, Connie.
Renewable energy is critical to the sustainability of our country and our world. We have a lot of opportunities that we're looking directly at right now, and Molly mentioned a few of them, with solar and wind. Renewable fuels is another one. Not any one of these are going to be, the magic that's going to cure anything, but it's going to be a combination of everything that will get us through. I would love to see our solar tax credit renewed in the state of Iowa so that people can invest in solar residential. I think that renewable fuels, if it's done right, might have a net negative CO2 by 2030. I think that industrial solar, and if farmers want to invest and put industrial solar on their farms, they ought to have that opportunity to do so. There's a lot that we need to do, and again, if we don't do something now, then I'm afraid that it's going to be far too late to fix it. So we can invest. Investment in renewable energy is an investment in Iowa. It's good for our brothers and sisters in labor. We will continue to work towards that and continue to invest in our state and in our infrastructure.
Yeah, I ditto. I agree with everything, and I also was going to mention the labor unions and the job creations, and especially very high-tech jobs. So I think, again, when we go back to this idea of how do we keep our kids in Iowa, how do we make them want to stay in Iowa? When we invest in that kind of technology and we give credit and we are employing more people, our kids want to stay here, and we have great paying jobs for them to want to stay here and raise their families here. So I think it all wraps back around to what Eric talks about, which is we need to make Iowa great again. We need to be a state that leads the charge in these industries and these credits. So that's what I would propose as well.
All right. Well, before we offer our candidates a closing statement, which will start with Eric and then Elizabeth and Molly, I would just like to thank you again for coming. And remember, as we know, our vote is our voice. And have a plan for how you are going to vote this year, and know where your polling place is. Some places have changed, and so where you have previously voted may not be the place this year. So check that information in advance. We got through most of the questions. There were a couple left we didn't get to on agriculture and education. If our candidates are available following this and you have a quick question you would like to address to them, then perhaps you can connect with them. Again, we thank you on behalf of the League of Women Voters for participating, and so we'll start with Eric and closing statements.
Again, thank you very much for everybody for being here. Thank you again to the League for hosting this. Voting is extremely important. That is where you have your voice heard. As they had mentioned, have a plan, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. I know that my vote in the Iowa House, I represent roughly 20,000 Iowans in the state legislature, but my vote impacts every single Iowan, regardless of their geographic area. I try to be very responsive to emails. I know that there's votes that I take that not everybody agrees with, and if you have a question about how I vote or why I took a vote, I try to be very upfront with you, and here's where my thought process was, and here's why I did what I did. It's not as always as simple as, it's a red button and a green button. There's a lot of things that go into it with amendments and other opportunities, but transparency is extremely important. And regardless of where we fall, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, I think we all agree on a lot more than what we disagree with. And if we can find what we agree on and work on what we disagree on, we can make Iowa a better place for every single person living in our state.
I don't know why, every time I follow you, the last comment you make is exactly what I was going to lead off with. There must be some synergy here. I identify, I'm a registered Democrat, I'm a proud Democrat. I'm also very fiscally responsible in my own life and with my businesses that I represent. So I always think it's important to look at what we need legislatively, and then how are we going to pay for it. I also spent a great deal of time doing international business for Rockwell Collins when I worked there. That was prior to my business. And I make this joke, and I'm hoping it doesn't fall flat in this room, that I have been fortunate to be on teams to negotiate with the Russians and to negotiate with the Chinese, so I'm pretty confident that I can negotiate with the other party. And I think that it does come down to collaboration, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as Eric was mentioning, if we start with what we can agree on and work our way out, we've got to find solutions, because the way that it's working now isn't working at a federal level, at a state level, and I don't know about you, but I'm sick of it. So I intend to work very hard to reach across the aisle and continue the good work for the state of Iowa.
I have not worked with the Russians or the Chinese, but I have worked with the Republicans. And there are Republicans that we can work with. We just, to make it very clear, 90% of what happens at the State House, we agree on. We vote for a lot of bills every single year, and we agree on those bills. It's the big topics that we don't agree on, and those are the ones that we need to find a way to work with our counterparts to come to the center, if you will, to make sure that we are getting what needs to happen for the majority of Iowans, and that is where I stand. I want to make sure that we're helping the people of Iowa. So when I see something where I can jump in and maybe make a change, and I know somebody on the other side who is very amenable to that, I go and work with them. And it has worked out very well for amendments to make sure that we can make some changes for Iowans in some of those bills that we've passed. So it is absolutely doable, and I am looking forward to continuing this as a senator on the other side, and getting to know the senators over there and working with them and making sure that we are doing the very best we can for Iowans and make Iowa the best place to live, so that the people who have left will want to come back, and for the people who are here, they'll want to stay. And the way we do that is making sure we have the best schools and the best jobs and the best places to recreate. So let's make Iowa great again, and let's vote this November 8th.
Let's show our appreciation for these candidates sharing their time with us today. Thank you. hold them up. The form's over on the side, or if you just wanna write a question, make it known, and somebody will bring you the sheet and a pen, and they will then collect your question. Our sorters are grouping the questions by topic, and the topics that get the most questions are the topics that we start with, that we lead with. And save your applause for when we are finished with the forum. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves, and then we will start with the questions. So let me make sure I've covered all the points. Turn off your cell phones if you have them. And we will let's start with Liz, since you're the experienced one, and we'll start with you and then go to Sammy and then Jeff. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Liz Bennett. I'm currently serving as a state representative from Cedar Rapids. I've been serving in this position for about the past 8 years, 4 terms, and I'm honored to now be running for Iowa Senate District 39. During my time in the State House, I've really pursued working for an Iowa where everybody gets a fair shot. And I think that some of the most critical issues to that are education, a clean environment, clean water, and just opportunity for everybody in Iowa. We need to have an inclusive Iowa. You know, growing up here, going to school, I've seen my friends leave the state. I think that's really unfortunate because Iowa can be a place where everybody has opportunities. So we need to preserve the things that we've been known for. We need to improve some other things, and I think when we do these things, we can reverse the flow of people leaving our state.
Thank you. Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming out this morning. My name is Sammy Sheets. I'm running for Iowa House District 78 on the southeast side of Cedar Rapids. And unfortunately, I'm not a known quantity like State Representative Liz Bennett, so just want to take a second and give you a little bit about my bio. I was born and raised in Cedar Rapids. My dad is from Cedar Rapids. My mom's an immigrant who came to Cedar Rapids 35 years ago to go to Coe College. She's from Damascus, Syria. I was born and raised here. Went to Harding Middle School, Washington High School, left to go to college, and then came back after I graduated to organize, and I've been organizing in progressive politics in Cedar Rapids and the state of Iowa for a decade. I'm really, really excited to be in this race. Some of the issues I'm focusing on are education, workers' rights, and healthcare. We've seen the privatization of Medicaid disproportionately impact disabled Iowans and decrease services across the state. We've seen Republicans underfund our public schools that used to be the best in the nation a decade ago, now are falling quickly. And union rights have been gutted by Republicans. We just saw unemployment legislation cut for workers in the state of Iowa in the last legislative session, and who knows what the Republicans are planning to do to attack workers in this upcoming legislative session. I appreciate the League of Women Voters for having us here today, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
It is on. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the League for inviting me and hosting this. I appreciate that. Thank you for everybody in attendance and watching online now and later. I'm Jeff Cooling, and I'm running for House District 77. I'm a union electrician here in Cedar Rapids, a 3rd generation union member in Cedar Rapids. And I'm running because, you know, I've seen what our state government can do, and right now, a lot of negative things that they're doing for working families and working people. So that's what motivated me to run. I'm a pretty regular guy. Like I said, I'm a union electrician. I'm president of my local union in my 2nd term, and negotiating contracts and working to represent my members is something that I take very seriously and I'm very proud to do, and I want to continue that work for the members of my district and the folks here in Iowa. So some of the things that are really important to me, obviously union rights and labor rights and worker rights, because they're at the forefront of the attack on working people, and making sure our schools are funded. I have 2 young kids, one in school and one in preschool, and making sure that they're well taken care of and educated, and our teachers and educators have all the tools they need. So many more things, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the questions.
All right, since Liz started with introductions, Sammy, we'll start with you with this question and go to Jeff and then Liz. The question has to do with Iowa's gun amendment that will be on the ballot. And let me share with you the language of that amendment. Article 1 of the Constitution of the State of Iowa is amended by adding the following new section. Under right to keep and bear arms, section 1A. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The sovereign state of Iowa affirms and recognizes this right to be a fundamental individual right. Any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny. So the question is, where do you stand on the gun amendment that will be on the ballot November 8th?
Thanks so much for the question. I'm strongly opposed to this, and every Iowan should be. So Republicans have been falsely claiming for the past year that this has been in the election cycle, that this is just adding the federal Second Amendment to our Iowa Constitution. And that's just not true. We just heard the language read exactly. It includes something called strict scrutiny, which would basically make it really hard for state legislators like us at this table to enact common sense gun reform that a majority of Iowans and Americans support at a time when we're seeing increased violence in schools. We do not need our judicial system hamstringing legislators, and so I encourage all Iowans to vote no on this amendment.
Okay, so, Second Amendment, I'm pro-Second Amendment. It's no secret, I own firearms, I participate in pistol leagues, and do all that, but strict scrutiny is really where the hang-up is for me and why I would be a no vote. This is not the Second Amendment. This is not the things that you are hearing. Like I said, I'm an electrician. I'm not a lawyer, but I know this is going to be bad for Iowa, and bad for our legislators, and bad for the people. So it's more about keeping people safe and making sure that responsible gun owners are the rule, and not allowing bad things to happen where they don't need to. So I'm a no vote on that.
Thank you for this question. I have voted against this twice on the State House floor, and when it first came up, I was the member on the bill leading the fight against it. I've also spoken about this on River to River. So the key thing that my soon-to-be colleagues have brought out here is that, number one, this is not the Second Amendment, as the proponents of this amendment would have you believe. It really revolves around the language of strict scrutiny. And this can get into the weeds for a lot of members of the public, and honestly, I suspect that that's part of why the bill was written this way. But what that language means when we're talking about judicial review is that any restriction on firearms must be so tailored to a compelling governmental interest that it's held to the same standard as when we evaluate some type of impact on race or religion, okay? So we are not talking about a well-regulated militia here. We are not talking about a lot of the common sense gun safety measures that most firearms owners do actually support. This is very extreme legislation, and I oppose it.
Thank you for your responses. The next question has to do with women's reproductive choice, and we will start with Jeff, and then Liz, and then Sammy. So, just to paraphrase the question, what is your position or your viewpoint on women's reproductive rights as it relates to abortion in Iowa?
All right, I believe that's healthcare, and healthcare is a right, and reproductive freedom is a right, and the woman, whoever she chooses to make that decision with, that's their decision, and certainly not mine for anybody else. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you for this question. I am 100% pro-choice. I've been a pro-choice champion during my career in the State House. I've told women and pregnant people stories time after time again on the State House floor to make sure that my constituents have a voice in the midst of extreme, insulting legislation that treats women and people who can become pregnant as if they are not adults, as if they are not full citizens who are entitled to make the most personal and private decisions for themselves. I will continue to be pro-choice. I will continue to tell people stories, and I will fight the extreme legislation that is surely coming at us this next year.
Thanks so much. I can't agree more with what my colleagues have just said. Earlier this summer when the Roe decision, or the Dobbs decision, came out, women in Iowa and across the United States woke up with less rights than they went to bed with the night before. And a group of partisan right-wing elected judges turned the clock back 50 years for women in this country. The good thing is that abortion, as of now, is still legal for women in the state of Iowa. But we know, everybody at this table and in this room knows, that if Republicans maintain their majorities and keep the governorship, they are going to try to pass a complete ban on abortion without exceptions, and a really, really extreme reversal of rights for women in this state. So I encourage everybody, we've seen this summer, literally thousands of people turning out who usually don't participate in the political process to demand their rights. So we're gonna have to fight like hell in January in the legislature to make sure that the Republicans cannot make women in this state second-class citizens. So I strongly, strongly support women's right to choose, and I will support any bill at the Iowa legislature that can codify that into Iowa law.
The next question, another hot topic, is on education, and we will start with Liz and then Sandy and Jeff. With school funding not keeping up with inflation, what can we do to attract quality teachers to Iowa?
Is crying an acceptable response? This is incredibly troubling to me. You know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I've been so proud about with our state, one of the things that I bragged about to people when I go to conferences, is the quality of our education system and the quality of our teachers. Our teachers are passionate, engaged folks. But with the chronic divestment from education in Iowa, it's made it really difficult for teachers. We've lost our teachers, people have lost the profession, people have gone to other states. My own best friend went to Boston, where she's flourishing, and that's great. I'm very happy for you, Boston. But I want our excellent teachers to stay in Iowa. The fact of the matter is that as Iowans, we are going to have to look this issue in the face, and we are going to have to fund our educational systems here in Iowa. This is the key to opportunity for our students. Whether you want to stay in Iowa or you want to pursue opportunities elsewhere, having that basis in education is what gives you those choices, and we have to have our teachers to get there. So, folks, teachers are educated professionals, they're crucial, we need to pay them.
So I mentioned in my intro that my dad grew up in Cedar Rapids in a working class family, and he would still tell you to this day that the excellent public schools in Cedar Rapids are what made it possible for him to get out of the working class into the middle class. And like I said earlier, our schools used to be #1 in the nation, and it was because we funded our schools fully. The past decade, Republicans have underfunded our schools. We used to spend or increase our SSA about 4 or 5% a year. The Republicans have brought that down to 1% or 1.5% every year. Think about how high inflation is this year. Schools are losing money when we funded it at that level. Another thing that's really important too when we talk about teachers, not just funding, but the way that we talk about the profession of teaching. We had the president of the Republican president of the state Senate, Jake Chapman, say that our teachers are public school teachers. 98% of Iowa kids go to public school. To say that those teachers have a sinister agenda is just absurd, and it's disrespectful to people who are doing public service in this state. Teaching is public service. To have that kind of rhetoric from the governor, who's attacking public education for the first time I've ever seen in a re-election campaign, and the president of the Senate, this is really, really harmful. And we've seen examples across the state, not just in Cedar Rapids, but across the state, of people who are hanging it up and saying enough is enough. I'm done teaching. These are some of the most excellent members of our society. So we really need to fund our schools and support our teachers.
All right, school funding, it's been underfunded, like has been said, but it's been underfunded with a budget surplus, right? So we're running a budget surplus here in the state, which is great. We run a balanced budget as required and have a little extra money left over, and instead of making sure our schools, our teachers, and all of our educators have the tools and funding they need, they're keeping it under the mattress in Des Moines somewhere. So making sure that, if we're going to run a surplus, that we're also funding all of our other programs that are important to the state. I graduated from Prairie High School in 2006, and it was a great time to go to school. We had all the best things. Every school I went to in the Prairie system was brand new when I got there, and big computer labs and all the technology. That's where I kind of started off on my career to be an electrician down in the industrial tech area. Another part of our schools that gets ignored and put to the side. But school funding, making sure our kids have the same opportunity I even had, and making sure that they can grow up and be successful, contributing adults to society and stay here in Iowa. And hopefully one day, my grandkids stay here and I can see them more often too. So fund our schools. It's the right thing to do.
The next question has to do with climate change, and in terms of order, we'll start with Sammy and then Jeff and Liz. What strategies or legislation would you propose to take steps to mitigate the negative effects of climate change for Iowa?
Thanks so much for the question. So the good news is we just had a couple months ago at the federal level the largest investment to combat the impacts of climate change that we've seen in decades in the Inflation Reduction Act out in Washington, D.C. That's going to bring tons of money to the state of Iowa to help us invest in renewable energy, to clean up our water system, and to invest in the electrification of our grid for electric vehicles down the road. So that's all really, really good news. At the state level in Iowa, the problem is we've seen our water quality deteriorate rapidly over the past decade. That has to do with some of our agricultural practices in the state, some of the regulations that we set for CAFOs, things like that. So there are tons of ways that the state legislature can combat climate change, promote renewable energies. Iowa, is already leading the nation in the use of renewable energy. 60% of our energy comes from wind and solar. That's phenomenal, but we can continue to do more. And I personally believe that nuclear energy is a transition, in addition to wind and solar, to get us to a carbon neutral state in the state of Iowa, hopefully in the coming years. But those are some of the things quickly that I think the state legislature can do in combating the impact of climate change.
First, climate change is real. It's happening. It's affecting us. It's going to continue affecting us. As an electrician, let's build the future, right? Let's get my brothers and sisters in labor together, and we're going to build solar farms and wind towers. Nuclear energy, that's a great option as well. In the interim, as we make the transition to eliminating our carbon footprint. And making sure, when we do that, and we make sure our agricultural systems are taken care of, and we can continue to be the leaders in the country in agricultural production in many areas, that our whole state will win then when we all work together to make sure we take care of our environment, the only environment we have here. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to serve on a national panel of young elected officials focusing on energy. And I took Iowa's climate story to the national level. I lost my home in the flood in 2008, and that flood was a climate disaster. We almost saw another unprecedented flood again in 2016. We've seen flooding in the Missouri Valley. So these extreme weather patterns that we're seeing are going to continue. I appreciate my soon-to-be colleagues' comments, because one of the most exciting things about addressing climate is that it's a rare opportunity that we have to do something excellent for the earth and also create good jobs for Iowans. So we can continue to invest in solar and the other types of clean energy that have been mentioned. I think we need to continue with tax credits to encourage consumers and also pave the way for larger use of solar and wind.
Thank you. The next question has to do with healthcare, and we'll start with Jeff and then Liz and Sammy. How do you hope to promote covering the loss of hundreds of nurses? University of Iowa healthcare system is down almost 300 nurses. Mercy and St. Luke's have many open nursing spots. How would you address this issue?
Yeah, this is a really large issue, and some of our employers, hospitals and stuff in the Cedar Rapids area are kind of taking to that and offering hiring incentives and trying to attract more permanent nurses, where right now they're covering a lot of their staffing shortages with travel nurse, which can cost up to 3 times the amount of a regular on-staff nurse. So that's one way to kind of free up that budget, is making sure that they have the tools, that there are nurses available. The newly announced program from Kirkwood and Mount Mercy, making nursing more attainable to more people, the profession itself, and making sure that we have the adequate folks to take those jobs. It's all there, right? I mean, funding is important, and making sure that those wages and benefits that nurses have are of a high standard, and making sure that they want to live in this state, and it just comes back to staying here as well, and making sure that we have a state that fully encompasses living, working, recreation, and a good place to make a life, and all the other decisions that are made up at the State House weigh into that, and wanting keeping nurses here that are trained here. So, thank you.
This is a complex problem. To really get into the nitty-gritty of creating policy to address it, I would want to sit down with the stakeholders. But there are 2 things that I would highlight. Number one, that's our overall workforce issue in Iowa. We're having a shortage of nurses, like we're having a shortage of other workers. Key to that is childcare. We have a severe childcare issue in Iowa. We've tried to work on it in the State House. We haven't had a whole lot of meaningful traction on that, so we are continuing to work on that. Number 2, I think, is making it easier in Iowa to form and join a union. We've seen union rights attacked in Iowa, and we've seen many people leave the nursing profession or not go into the nursing profession. And I think that's because in many ways it's a tough job. When you're maybe not getting the pay you should, you're struggling with childcare, training in school is expensive, and you're not getting the voice you feel that you should get, and it's hard to maintain your union in your workplace, that all adds up to a shortage of nurses, and that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, my colleagues have covered just excellent points, and just from a personal note, I think when I toured St. Luke's Hospital a couple weeks ago in Cedar Rapids, workforce development issues, the quality of life, just saying that people come here, they work for a little bit, they study at our excellent schools, and then they leave. And I know that personally from friends from high school that have left, that trained here, that went to school here, and then pursued things elsewhere. And that has a lot to do with the kind of state that we're building, a state that is less welcoming than the state that I grew up in, a state that invests in its people less than the state that I grew up in. So if we really want to retain people, not just in nursing, but across the field, we have to change the narrative of Iowa and change our image here. The other thing too, related to nursing as well in terms of healthcare, we've seen with the privatization of Medicaid in this state that hospitals, doctors, and obviously patients are seeing huge reductions in their services. They're having to wrangle with companies that are out of state, that are taking dollars from Iowans out of state, and that aren't reimbursing doctors and patients at the rates that they used to when the state ran Medicaid. So reversing the privatization of Medicaid will go a long way to helping us retain nurses and healthcare professionals in the state of Iowa.
This next question really relates also to a couple of things we've already discussed, and it relates to public employees and collective bargaining. Would you support restoring collective bargaining rights for public employees?
That's the order.
The order, sorry about that. We'll start with Liz, then Sammy, and Jen.
Yes, I 100% would. I was there for that fight in the State House. Representative Stade is out there as well. You know, all of us fought and detailed the many, many ways which those changes would harm Iowans, and still it passed. So I fought against it, and I would 100% work to restore those rights.
Yeah, I would absolutely support restoring the workers' rights that were gutted by Republicans. And I just want to remind everybody, there was huge intentionality behind why they did that, because they knew that when workers, collectively worked together to demand more from the bosses, from the government, et cetera, in terms of wages, rights, benefits, et cetera, they were also worried about the strength that workers' unions had in the state, and deliberately passed these laws to make sure that unions wouldn't be as impactful in the political realm. That was deliberate, and we've seen that the results of that over the past couple of years as well. But no, workers in the state deserve to have collective bargaining rights restored. I was in union on a campaign, and I was on a campaign that didn't have a union, and it was night and day for me. It was kind of a light bulb moment of, oh my God, every single worker in the state deserves to have this, deserves to be able to work with others and fight collectively for respect and rights and better wages from their bosses. That's a fundamental right of every Iowan and every American, and something that I would support strongly from the legislature.
So to answer the question quickly, yes, I would support it, returning those bargaining rights to public employees and expanding them as needed to make sure they cover more and more people. Just a little bit about the current law that was passed in 17. That's something that I went to the State House and fought as well. I spoke in the rotunda, talked about my neighbor and his young family and how it would negatively affect him. And one of those specific things being the maximum wage increase over a year. So you're talking the maximum that they can receive is 3% or CPI, whichever is lower. So in an inflationary environment like we're in right now, where we're 7, 8, 9%. Take a look at the numbers, 3% maximum. That's all they can get. So they're guaranteed, our state workers are guaranteed to take a pay cut, even with a wage increase this year. And that's wrong. That was why whoever thought of that targeting the folks that run our state. I don't get it. Another thing that ridiculous. With the time I have left, is the recertifications every 2 years for representation in the workplace. So what they have to do is every 2 years they have to recertify their union. And one thing that's crazy that no one would ever think of is a non-vote in that election is a no vote for that election. So if somebody does not vote, it counts as a no matter what. Nobody would get elected to office with that style of voting. So thank you.
We have time for one more question, but before we do that final question and then closing comments, I just want to remind you to vote. Your vote is your voice. We have some materials on the back table with dates, and the laws have changed. You can go to the Secretary of State website for those changes. You can also look at the Lynn County Auditor's website, but the absentee ballot request form must be received by October 24th, and the first absentee ballots will be mailed out Wednesday, October 19th for people who got their requests in earlier, and in-person absentee early voting begins October 19th. The times have changed, polling places now close at 8 p.m. instead of 9 p.m., and some of those precincts have changed. So be sure you have a plan to vote and know where your polling place is. We also have a card on the back table for those of you who are present, tips for voters with some of this information and links for that information as well. Apologize that I'm not going to read all of that for those of you who are watching this recording. The final question has to do with agriculture, and the order will be Sammy, Jeff, and Liz. We know we live in a highly agricultural state, and I'll leave it at that. Do you have thoughts about how to move toward a more sustainable and humane agriculture in Iowa?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. And as you noted, agriculture is a huge part of Iowa's economy. So there, I think, are a number of things that we can do. I definitely am not as knowledgeable in this area as some other people, and obviously it's not as directly impactful for Southeast Cedar Rapids district as it is in some other districts around the state of Iowa. But we do have some issues in terms of the agricultural practices that we're using now. And like I mentioned earlier, in terms of the impacts on water quality in the state, there are a lot of things that legislators need to look at and study really carefully about what we can do to ensure that future generations have access to clean water. That's a basic right that I think government needs to ensure and protect in the state. I am somebody who supports renewable fuels and think they're a really important part of Iowa's economy as well, and I think as we look forward to expanding that market and seeing where we can use some of those renewable fuels, we need to look to certain things like airplane fuel down the road, and there's different applications in terms of looking toward the future of how we can make that process more energy efficient and more clean going forward.
We need to, and to a greater degree, I support our farmers in the state. I've worked at large cereal mills in and around Cedar Rapids, soybean plants, corn plants, and I know the value that it brings to the community to have those jobs and for people to make a decent living there, like myself, and put food on the table and take care of our families. The other thing is farmers aren't anti-environment. They work that land every day. They want to make sure it's taken care of. They just need some tools to be able to do that, and making sure that we're funding the education and the implement of watersheds, and making sure that some of those buffers are put in place for creeks, rivers, and streams is really important, and making all of those things that farmers want to do and that they're happy to do to reduce their impact downstream for cities pulling out all of those nitrates and everything into the city water supply. So it's a big, everything kind of works together, but we can do it if we can all sit down and find those things that we can agree on.
So this is another big topic, but I think something to know is that corporations are profiting and people are paying. So what we've seen in the state of Iowa is corporate agriculture consolidating what used to be family farms. And with that, we've seen a focus on profits over people. Some practical things that could be done in the state of Iowa for more sustainable agriculture would be actually putting some teeth into our water quality legislation. The voluntary strategies advocated by the governor and her party have not worked. I have never worked a job. I've never worked at a job where you got to just say, I came up with an idea and I tried, so that's good enough, right? No. When it comes to our water quality, we need something that works. We need to ask the people who are profiting from pollution to come to the table, pay their fair share, invest in protecting our waterways and our soil. When those toxins are running into our waterways, our soil is running off with it. Number two, I have supported a moratorium on CAFOs in the state. And number three, along with that, and I don't have time to fully get into this, but puppy mills are not regulated like they should be or inspected like they should be because they fall under agriculture. That is a shame. People who go to veterinary school in other states actually study Iowa as a case study, and we need to reform that.
All right, before we do our closing statements, which we will start with Jeff and then Liz and then Sammy, on behalf of the nonpartisan League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and we will start with Jeff.
Thank you, and thank you again to the league for having us and inviting me. It's great to be here, great to see everybody in attendance, and those now and later online. So I'm excited for this opportunity, for this responsibility to the folks in my district and of Iowa to represent them up in Des Moines. In November 8th, we're going to vote. We need to make sure that all of our voices heard. Voting is very important. Don't let anybody tell you different. Right now, we still all have that right. So let's make sure that that stays, that we do our small bit of civil responsibility and elect folks that we agree the most with to go up to Des Moines and help make Iowa a better place. I would definitely ask for anybody's vote on the southwest side of Cedar Rapids in District 77. And thank you all. I look forward to taking any questions. I'm very open, get back to emails, and want to make sure that if anything comes up in the next legislative session, to please reach out and let's have a conversation and figure something out. So thank you.
Just want to thank again the League of Women Voters for organizing these forums. Thank you to everybody who's in attendance today. Our vote is our voice. And we have an opportunity here in the United States that people over the world are still fighting and dying for. So thank you for engaging in the process in this way. I'm Liz Bennett. I'm a candidate for Senate District 39 in Cedar Rapids, and I believe in the potential of Iowa. I believe in a great education for every Iowa kid. I believe that every Iowan should be able to access a career that offers them a dignified way of life. And I believe that we can have clean water and clean air in Iowa, that everybody can get a fair shot in Iowa. So if you agree with me, I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thanks so much for everybody that came this morning, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. Again, my name is Sammy Sheets. I'm running for House District 78 in Southeast and Southwest Cedar Rapids, and I told you guys a little bit about my bio and my story, my parents' story in the intro. I would just say that my dad's story is not really a reality as much anymore today in Iowa. Whom you're born to now in Iowa really determines the trajectory of your life, and it didn't used to. It used to matter whether you worked hard, whether you had goals, whether you invest in yourself and your family. But now we're seeing that there really is an equality of opportunity in the state. If you're born to a single mom in Cedar Rapids who's working multiple jobs, you don't really see your kid. Your schools are getting worse because they're based on and mainly funded through property taxes and not as much through the state government as they used to. You do not have the same quality of opportunity as an upper middle class kid who grew up in Cedar Rapids. And Iowa didn't used to be that way. The thing that mattered is whether you worked hard, whether you invested in your family. That Iowa dream, the American dream that used to be a reality here in this state, is not the case anymore. It's because Republicans have underfunded our public education system, gutted our workers' rights, and made our health care less accessible since the privatization of Medicaid. So I'm going to do everything in my power in the state legislature to fight for working families and working people in Cedar Rapids in my district. I want to be as accessible as I can to the community, and I really appreciate your support and hopefully your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Let's show our appreciation to the candidates. We'll be taking a 15-minute break, and then we have a forum for House District 79, House District 80, and Senate District 40.
as well as Senate District 40. I'm Karen Lewis. I am the secretary of our local Lynn County League of Women Voters. And since its founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. Through its mission, the League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through the education and advocacy with voters. Today's forum is part of our voter education efforts. And we are happy to have the following candidates with us here today. From House District 79, candidate Tracy Ellert. She is running unopposed. For House District 80, we have candidates Art Stead and Barrett Hubbard. For Senate District 40, we have candidates Chris Guck and Todd Taylor. All right, well, thank you all candidates for taking time out of a busy campaign season to be here with us today. So the format for this morning is that questions were submitted in advance by our audience present in the room today. We did have a link online as well, eliciting feedback from our internet and our virtual viewers as well. Each participating candidate will have 1.5 minutes to introduce themselves to the audience at the start of the forum, and then again for closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to each question asked by myself, the moderator, and candidates can give up their 90 seconds if they choose. They can cede it to another candidate or just pass. That's fine if it doesn't apply. And we have a timer right up front who will show when there's 30 seconds as a warning, and then 15, and finally when the time has elapsed. All right, so I am going to, for how we're going to ask the questions, I will keep, I hate to score here, but I'm going to track it here on this worksheet. That way everyone's has different periods when they will be asked the questions. So you're not always first or always last. We want to be fair about that. So our first go around, I'm going to start here closest to me with Tracy and work this way for opening statements.
Good time.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name's Tracy Ellert. For the past 4 years, I represented Iowa House District 70. With the change in the maps, that'll be now at House District 79. Pretty similar boundaries, lost a little bit of area. I am the early childhood expert in the House, so you'll see me working on a lot of child and family related legislation. Also work in the Cedar Rapids Community School District, so education is very important to me, and healthcare, labor issues, workforce issues. Thank you.
Good morning, Todd Taylor, State Senator, running for re-election in what is partly a new district and partly a district that I've had before. I'm recently retired union representative after 28 years with the Public Employees Union, AFSCME. And I always appreciated Governor Tom Vilsack's phrase that he used about making Iowa a great place to live, work, raise a family, and retire. And that's an important distinction, so I give him credit for it. It's not anything that's new for me today. This is something that I've worked on and what I believe in. And you know, my wife and I, we've raised our family here and want to retire here. Iowa is a great place. We need to keep it a great place. So we still have work to do, and I want to continue those things for the citizens of Northwest Cedar Rapids, Northeast Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Robbins, and including where we are sitting here. And so I look forward to getting into the issues and answering the questions specifically, but again, thank you for being here.
Morning, everyone. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this forum. I really appreciate it, an opportunity to speak with people and to listen to what people have to say and what questions are important. I am Representative Art Stade, Democratic Representative Art Stade from District 66, representing Northeast Cedar Rapids. I look forward to representing District 80, which would include Robbins and Hiawatha. I'd like to be able to represent them as well in the state legislature. So I was born in Joplin, Missouri. I have 11 brothers and sisters. And it taught me two things that are priorities for me. Number one, you have to look out for one another. It's important that we look out for the least and the most vulnerable in our state. That's extremely part of the government's role. The second thing is I appreciate the value of a good education, a great education, and it's really important in the state of Iowa. So I look forward to representing all of you in the state. Thank you.
My name is Barrett Hubbard. I'm a candidate for State House 80. And so I've been married to my wife, Heather, for 18 years, and we have 4 children and a foreign exchange student who's been with us for the last 4 years. And so I'm an employer at Shive Hattery, a civil engineer. And as part of that civil engineering work, it's a very analytical sort of job, right? We do a lot of analysis when we go to solve problems. And so doing that within the state legislature is no different. And in fact, it's actually something that's quite lacking. So because when we get a problem, when we go to start a project, and we're trying to figure out what needs to go, what is the best solution, or what is a potential solution, we'll oftentimes bring lots of people into the room with us, and we'll just have conversations and discussions. And we can have varying different points of view. And then it's our job as engineers to then take the bits and pieces from all of those different potential solutions and synthesize those together into one that will be the best solution for the problem that we're facing. And also then we take and we look at that potential solution, and we look downstream of that. What's the effects of actually implementing this and building this project in the real world? How is that going to have an impact on that? And so that's an area that I think I would bring to the State House that will benefit the legislature.
And it's bell time.
Good morning. My name is Chris Julik, as mentioned before. Thank you to the League for hosting this event. Thank you for those of you attending. It's terribly important or critically important for you to be engaged in the political process, and so thank you for doing that. I am running for Iowa Senate District 40, and my primary reason for running is to get a seat at the table in the majority party in Des Moines. We don't have that representation now, and that becomes a challenge for us when there are issues related to the Cedar Rapids metro area that we don't have that majority representation there. I promise to bring the same kinds of independent decision-making and reasoning that I used when I was on the city council for 12 years in Cedar Rapids. I have some priorities, and I think we'll probably talk about those priorities a little bit more certainly in some of the questions that you may have, but certainly economic development is a huge impact that we have from our communities as well as the state, that the state deals with at the Senate level. Education, 55% of the state's general fund budget is education, so educational excellence is an important piece of our community and our state. Quality of life, government's in the quality of life business, and so having good places for people to live and play and grow their families is critically important. And lastly, being fiscally responsible with your taxpayer dollars. Those are the priorities that I have right now, and we'll talk about more of those as we get through some of the questions. So thank you again.
Okay, our first question deals with the topic of education. And the question submitted is, are you for or against the governor's plan to use public school monies for private schools? Why, or how would you modify that plan? And we'll start, sorry, with Todd. Apologize. I should say
No
that.
problem, thank you for that. You know, over the years, Iowa was top 5 in education, and we've slipped. We're out of the top 5 now. We're toward the bottom, and that is just wrong. We spend a lot of money on education, but kind of the issue is, how are we prioritizing that? The governor wants to privatize public dollars and put them in private schools. And she has fancy words like, oh, it's a scholarship, or it's just a voucher. Well, what it does is further erodes our public education system, and that's just wrong. So what we need to do is, instead of arguing over how much a percentage increase was, or what the cost of living is, and did we meet that, or did we not, what we need to do is we need to have aggressive testing in reading in the 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. I only know that because I talk to teachers who tell me, the experts, this is how you keep a kid on track. Because we also found that if a kid is off track, by the 9th grade, it is very difficult to bring them back on track. So so we've vilified teachers in the Iowa Senate. Our Senate president calls them sinister, and they have a sinister agenda, and they're mad about librarians. Well, at Cedar Rapids Jefferson, they don't even have a library. So we've got to not worry so much about the dollar figure. I want results, and I want to do that through aggressive testing and make sure that we don't leave any kid behind in reading skills moving forward.
Art will take it next. We'll just move down the line.
I'm opposed to the governor's voucher move. It's shifting money, public money, from our public schools, which is a fundamental issue in the state, to provide that for every individual child to have a great education in the state. We're funneling that money off in order to send it to private institutions. That's not the good use of public funds. It's also undermining our public schools, which are underfunded year after year, have been 11 out of the last 12 years, where they don't even meet the criteria for inflation, in order to cover that inflation. And each and every year we hear from our administrators and our school districts and our superintendents about the needs for additional resources because of rising costs like we all see. Instead, with the cuts, you would call it cuts because it doesn't keep up with inflation. And those cuts require cutting teachers, cutting coursework, and so students have less opportunity for a great education.
I am actually in favor of the governor's school choice legislation. And this is for a couple reasons. A, we have certain parents that might be in, say, the Linmar School District around here that are not happy with the way that the school district is implementing policies that have a direct impact on their students, that they don't agree with those policies, and they voice their opinion, and the school district and the school board specifically does not listen to that. So, you know, as far as education funding, and I'm sure we're going to get into this a little bit more, my overall arching thing would be in kind of an all of the above approach. A, vouchers, because it creates competition between a private school and a public school, which then, when that happens, we see innovation in the private sector, so that raises everybody up. B, let's increase the accountability and the requirements for education. Because like Todd mentioned, we are in the bottom 5 now, or in the bottom half of the nation. We used to be top 5, and that is not acceptable. And the third aspect would be to just raise the overall level of funding for public schools, because it's needed, and we have been fiscally responsible within the state, and so we have the ability to do that.
Thank you. Well, I had educational excellence as one of the priorities that I have. You're going to see a trend in some of my responses because they're going to have a similar type of flavor to them. When I did some work looking into the budget for the state of Iowa, 55% of our education, or 55% of the state's general fund budget is going into education. So, you know, on the city council, I was there for 12 years. We didn't deal with education a lot. So what did I do? I started meeting with superintendents, school board presidents, teachers, parents, administrators, all of those people. In fact, I had a meeting yesterday with the superintendent from community college and talked to them about what are the issues that they're experiencing in their classrooms and with the students. And so I think that's the way I approach problems, finding out how we can get information and using data to be able to support making public policy decisions. I haven't seen the data that supports the vouchers or the scholarship program that the governor has presented. If you can show me that there's proof that that makes our educational outcome systems better, then I'd be open to looking at it. But I haven't seen that data to support it, and so I wouldn't be a support of it until I saw some reasons for having that. I think it's important for us to adequately fund our educational system, but it isn't just about throwing money at it. And none of the people that I met with was that the first thing that they said. There are a lot of other issues that need to be dealt with in our educational system to be able to improve.
So I always like to start with that I am for school choice. I want all kids to have the opportunity to have the best educational experience, and the parents, you know, are the best to decide that. But we already have that. You can choose to go to homeschool. You can choose to go to private school, you can choose to go to public school, whatever your option might be. You can do virtual now too. And when we talk about the budget that goes to education in the state, we have to remember that's not just K through 12. So that also goes to our regions, our community colleges, some of the early ed. So it's not just our K through 12. The issue that I have with vouchers, I'm definitely no on vouchers or any form of vouchers. But my big issue is that same pot of money, and when it goes to the public schools, they have this whole long list of things that they are accountable for and have to follow. But when we give it to homeschools or private schools, they don't have that same oversight. So why does one have to meet everything for public dollars and the other doesn't? And it could potentially leave a lot of people out because they get to pick their students. Public school doesn't.
Thank you. All right, our next question will begin with Art for a response. And the topic is on the Bennett amendment. So where do you stand on the amendment that is on the ballot this fall, and why?
Well, I'm opposed to the amendment, and I think it's reckless. And the reason is not because it's about the Second Amendment, which it really isn't. We already have the Second Amendment under the U.S. Constitution. It wouldn't change that whatsoever. So actually that was what you call it, a red herring put in there to get support for it. It's about the term strict scrutiny, and strict scrutiny would be used by the courts in deciding whether or not a gun law or a gun restriction or a common sense gun safety law was constitutional, but have to have the strictest what they call strict scrutiny and judicial review of that law. And what it would mean, which is what it has meant in many other states, 3 other states where they have this particular law, is that there'd be challenges to the common sense gun laws that we have. And just the challenges themselves with the court costs and the time that the state would be devoted to that, and our local jurisdiction be devoted to defending every common sense gun law from challenge would be costly and could end up changing many of the common sense laws that we have and getting rid of them.
As far as the Second Amendment bill that is proposed on the ballot this fall, I am actually a supporter of that. You know, we're talking about a lot of common sense gun laws, right? But really these are knee-jerk reactions to stuff that's happening within our society and issues that we've seen and people that have chosen to go take a weapon and use it in a way that it was never intended to be used. And so what we have is a broken society. And this broken society started 50, 60 years ago when we stopped teaching morals and things like that that come from the Bible that we were founded upon and within our society. And so what we've seen is a complete degradation of our society. And so I think that we need to work at rebuilding that society back up and reteaching the value of life and helping other people with mental illness and things like that so that they don't go take a gun and do something that is atrocious. You know, none of us want to see a school get shot up, but having red flags and things like that for people that are on a list because they might have a certain point of view that is different from the political party that's in power at the time is not the right way to go about that. So now if there are people that have mental illness and things like that and they've seen a doctor and they shouldn't have a weapon for that time, then that's something that we're okay looking at.
I had the opportunity in the last month or so to meet with both of the police chiefs in Cedar Rapids and in Hiawatha and talk to them. Wanted to get information about public safety and how they operate and the issues that they have. Interestingly enough, one of the comments that the police chief from Cedar Rapids, Wayne German, presented to me, he referred to a report by the Police Executive Research Forum that had comments in it and 9 recommendations as to how to reduce gun violence in the United States. This is a group of hundreds of police chiefs around the country. And the #1 item that they said was certainty of punishment. Meaning people have gun crimes that they commit and there's no ramifications for them. And that is a problem. They need to make sure that the laws that we have are in place that are being enforced and that there's ramifications for bad decisions. Now those can be varied depending upon what the the item was, but that's the number one thing that they said would help reduce gun violence. All the police chiefs around the country, certainty of punishment. I thought that was interesting. Now, as far as the amendment to the Constitution for Iowa, it's on the ballot, and citizens of Iowa are going to make that decision, and I will abide by whatever decision they make.
I really don't have anything else to add that Representative State didn't already cover. I mimic his answer. I'm a no. I support common sense gun legislation.
And I would just add a little bit to what I heard from Representative State, that, you know, in Iowa and in this country, we have gun rights, and they're protected by the Constitution, the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. And what they're seeking to do in Iowa is to take those and then add the strict scrutiny. The thing about strict scrutiny is how the ballot question will be worded. It'll sound like, well, you just want to enshrine and protect the rights that we already have. A lot of people are going to say okay to that. But if you hurt somebody with a gun and you don't have, as Chris would say, and the police chiefs, certainty of punishment, then that's going to sway the decisions. Example, you hurt somebody, domestic violence, using a gun, you lose your gun right in this country. The strict scrutiny could throw that into question. And here is the thing that's also scary, that is nobody's talking about it. And that is, recently we've seen our governor with enormous amount of power consolidate and change power relative to selecting judges. So if she gets to stack the deck further, she's already stacked the deck in district courts, she's working on it in the Supreme Court. And if you pick judges who will interpret strict scrutiny in such a way, and then good people say, oh, I'm for gun rights, then you vote yes on this amendment, you're going to end up having judges take away the ability to give certain punishment, to give a defined punishment for those who hurt people with guns. That's complicated, and it's hard to put that on a bumper sticker, but that's where we're at, so I'm a no.
Our next question will start with Barrett, and our topic is economic development. What are your priorities for economic development programs here in Iowa?
So when I look at economic development, it's small businesses are the key to the economic engine of the state of Iowa, and that includes small farms. And so, you know, the legislature needs to be able to get behind the small businesses and the family farms and give them all the support that they need to be able to, A, start a business, grow their business, and prosper. And that includes then getting the employees that they need to be able to do the work. You know, we've seen such an erosion of our workforce over the last 2.5 years from varying different things. But part of it is the fact that the government has stepped in and is just supplying lots of amount of money to people so that they don't feel like they have to actually go out and work. And so we need to make sure that, you know, the priority is people working, because we need, you know, you walk into just about any business downtown, throughout this city, they all have help wanted signs. And if you go talk to them and say, hey, have you know, I see you're looking for a job, have you had anybody apply? No, we haven't. We've had this up for weeks. We've had nobody come in, nobody wants to work. And so, you know, we need to reinforce the fact that working in this country is what made this country amazing.
Certainly, being a CPA, I work with a lot of businesses, and I have the opportunity to talk with a lot of them to find out what the issues are from their operational standpoint. And workforce comes up all of the time. And so part of our job in the state legislature is to provide a quality of life here in Iowa that will attract people to the state. We need to make sure that we are doing things to create new businesses. What can we do to incentivize entrepreneurs to start up their businesses? The new BOCO and the Iowa Startup Accelerator are great examples of that. The Entrepreneurial Development Center working with businesses to help them so they reduce the chances of failure, because starting up a business is tough work. I did it myself, owned my business for 17 years. It's tough work. There's lots of ups and downs in that entrepreneurial world. So you need that support system to help you. The state can certainly help in that area as well by encouraging and providing opportunities for grants and tax incentives to be able to get those businesses up and running. I'm a big proponent of the Angel Investment Tax Credit and Innovation Tax Credit that go to investors, the individuals, individual people that make investments in those businesses to help them get up and started. You know, we have one of the largest employers in Cedar Rapids is Rockwell Collins or Collins Aerospace, and that started out as an entrepreneurial business, and so we need those. We probably have some of those right now in their infancy stage in the area here, but we don't know who they are yet, and it's going to take years before we'll know that for sure. But having that opportunity to provide state benefit and a quality of life and the opportunity for people to come here and start up a business is extremely important.
So I actually agree with some of that. We do need to support our small business owners. I'm a small business owner myself. My husband and his family run a small business, so we've seen a lot of the struggles over the past couple of years with the pandemic, with the derecho, the lack of being able to find a workforce to come in and work for us. But nobody's mentioned yet the reason that a lot of people can't get back to work is the lack of childcare. And we keep pumping money into building new facilities, but not addressing the issue that we don't have enough early childhood educators to staff those childcare facilities. And until that happens, working parents can't get back to work. We also need to make Iowa an attractive place to want to stay here and work, or people to come here and work. And so again, that means we've got to invest properly in our educational systems, including like our community colleges and regions. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yes, I agree. My answer is not that different from what we just heard. Education is the key. So if we fund education and attract employers and then give opportunities for workers to expand into apprenticeship programs or community college or regions, then that will develop our skilled workforce. And you put skilled workforce in front of the employers that are out there right now, they need a skilled workforce. That will produce good paying jobs. Investing in education, connecting skills to skilled workers and skilled workers to good paying jobs. The next thing we have to do is focus on cultural activities and things that stop the brain drain, make people want to stay here and not leave to another metropolitan area, another state. So, you know, the Nubo incubator or a water park or, you know, trails, cultural events, these kinds of things are what makes life interesting. So back to the theory of, you know, what we heard from Governor Vilsack, make Iowa a great place to live, work, raise a family, and retire. Focus on housing and also affordable housing, and for did you just say no? I'm done. Oh, I didn't want to go my time. Okay, sorry. So housing and of course childcare. These things help people get back into the workforce and give them skills. Focus on education that gets us there.
So Senator Taylor and Representative Eller had a lot of good comments there, a lot of good points. So it's the workforce development, which is really key, access to capital and assistance to our small businesses, which are the engine of the economy. But also particularly the education. And this brings up the topic too of our universities. Our universities are full of research opportunities for businesses in the state of Iowa. And we want to make sure that they're funded well, that those partnerships are developed between the local economies and our universities throughout the state. But education is the key, and the quality of life, and of course, good, fair, good paying jobs that are family sustainable, so that people can live a life that they've dreamed of, put a little money away for retirement, take care of their children, make sure that we have a great education in the state.
Thank you. Our next question will be, Chris will start, and the topic is renewable energy. What are some of your thoughts on renewable energy and how it should be managed or expanded here in Iowa?
Well, actually, one of the part-time jobs that I have is working with a company that does analysis of wind turbine blades. So I have a pretty good understanding of the wind turbine industry, much more than I ever thought I would, knowing how fast those turbines spin and how much generation they have. Certainly, we are a leader in the country in terms of our renewables, both with solar and particularly with wind turbines that we have. I think that we need to make sure that we have appropriate zoning for it, but I do think that it's important for us to be able to have that as a renewable resource here in the state and be a leader in that particular area.
I'm gonna yield my time to Senator Taylor.
Thank you. This should give us plenty. The issue of renewable resources is very important, particularly here in Iowa. We must never forget that Iowa is the breadbasket of the world, and so we want to make sure that we have sustainable living for us and the rest of the planet. That includes clean air and clean water. And we have excelled in being a net exporter of solar power and wind energy in particular, but we are developing these technologies. We also have ethanol. We have the world's largest ethanol plant here at ADM. And we draw corn from a 60-mile radius, and so that is a renewable resource. Eventually, we do need to get off fossil fuels. And I'm happy to know about the federal legislation that says we're going to focus on electric vehicles. But that also is batteries that are to be developed in the United States, taken back from China. So we have, but I'm going to need gas this afternoon, right? So we definitely need to invest in our ethanol in Iowa right now, and then work towards these other renewables as we progress. The thing that is almost never talked about, but I think it would be something that we could also invest in, and that's better insulation in windows, walls, roofs, in their construction process, and better batteries, because we would waste less. So remember the 1970s, I was probably just a little kid then, but you know, it was reduce, reuse, recycle. So I know that there's neighborhoods that I've been knocking doors in, and people that I know, and they have old windows that are really just, they waste energy. So if we can improve that, that will also help save them. The other thing is, we've talked about solar panels, and we can have industrial scale, or put it on your house. It needs to be south-facing. But wouldn't it be great if our technology could evolve into where the size of a roof shingle is a receptacle? And I know that we have some electrical experts here in the room. We just heard from a few. I know technology is going to get better so that we can have better usage and less waste and more power, right, from the sun. And also, I would also use science in working with we have some true experts. There's a fancy word they have, but I'll just use the word manure expert over at Iowa State University, and they're talking to us about how to develop our chemicals so that we can produce better food and have less runoff, and certain microorganisms can help us bind the soil so much that certain things don't run off, and it's better for the environment. But it involves, guess what? Investment in the vet med research or in science in Iowa State University.
Someone recently told me that if God wanted us to have clean, sustainable energy, that he would put a nuclear reactor in the sky. Well, actually he did. It's called the sun. And any opportunity that we have in the state of Iowa to use that free energy from the sun for solar, we should do it. And that includes more residential solar, more regional solar energy, and this produces good jobs in the state as well. We also need to continue with the wind energy because that's another free source, sustainable, clean energy in the state. So the more we get away from the fossil fuels that contribute to our climate problems, we also see the economic viability of this as well. It's cheaper, more economic, and it provides good jobs in the state of Iowa as well.
So on the topic of energy, I mean, you know, we need, for an economy to function, we need abundant, cheap energy. Now, as technology comes around for solar and wind and stuff like that, the advancements that we've seen over the last 15 to 20 years have made solar and wind much more viable as a supplemental resource. But we're still not to the point where we're going to be able to run our entire economy off from completely renewables. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't continue to invest in renewable energy to make it more available and make it cheaper. But where we're at right now, we still need, the majority of our energy comes from fossil fuels. And we don't have the infrastructure in place to make a magical switch to fully renewable next 15 to 20 years, like some politicians want. If we started today to invest completely in that, it would take at least 30 to 40 years to even be at a situation like that. So, I mean, I'm all about investing in energy because we need energy to run our economy, and it's going to be a mix of both renewables and fossil fuels for the foreseeable future.
All right, we're looking at the time, and unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to get to all of the questions. And we had some wonderful questions on women's reproductive rights, voting laws, agriculture, and the budget. So I absolutely encourage our audience to ask questions of our legislators in the interim between the two forums. I apologize, we ran out of time for those. Really important questions to ask. And before we begin those closing statements, I just want to let our audience and our virtual audience as well know that your vote is your voice, and we want you to make your voice heard on Tuesday, November the 8th. Please vote. Remember, our polls close an hour earlier now at 8 p.m. Also, I encourage those here in person to pick up some information on the way out about early voting, which will happen October the 19th through November the 7th. If you aren't able to early vote or vote in person, there's obviously absentee ballots, which can be accepted through October the 24th. We're also going to get this up on our website, so make sure all that information is in your hands and you make your voice heard. So as we go through, we're going to give you 90 seconds again for closing statements to let the audience and voters know your stance and why we should vote for you on the November the 8th. So as I went through my chart, we're back to Tracy just done with closing statements. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting these forums. They're such an important opportunity for everyone to come together and ask their questions and meet the candidates. Again, thank you guys for attending. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions in the interim. And as always, I'll be continuing to support Iowa's families, children, and workers.
Thank you. I also will echo that. Thank you to the League. But here's another reason why. This is a forum that is fair, bipartisan, and open to the public, and that is really very, very important. I also will make a plug for them that and all of us candidates, I'm sure, has answered the question on vote411.org. Some of the questions that we didn't get to are also, our answers are on that, but I will share with you when I'm going to read it so I don't miss anything. I will never vote to reduce access to the polls or prevent a ballot from being counted. We have seen the law change in the wrong direction in the past few years. It is astonishingly wrong. Recently enacted laws voted only on by Republicans have reduced access to voters at the ballot box. Examples include closing the polls 1 hour earlier, shortening the time frames for requesting, voting, and returning vote-by-mail ballots, reducing the number of locations of ballot drop boxes, purging voter registrations, eliminating straight party voting, and blocking certain ballots from being counted even if they were mailed in on time. Lastly, some voters will be disenfranchised and deemed inactive after missing just one election. I chose to focus my closing on that because voting is everything in our democracy, and it's not a spectator sport, and so you must participate. Thank you for being here.
I'm Representative Art Stade, and I wanted to thank, first of all, the League of Women Voters for these forums. As the Senator said, they're awesome. Appreciate all of you for coming and anybody that's viewing. I sure would appreciate your vote in November.
I also want to echo thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum today. It is great for you guys out there to hear our hearts. So a little bit more about me. I have 4 kids in high school and middle school. And when I look at the direction that this country is going and the absolute mess that has been created by the current politicians that we have in office, predominantly on the national level, but you know, it's like, man, what's it gonna look like in just a few short years when this next generation starts getting out of school and starts joining the adult world and the workforce and things like that if we don't make some changes today. And so, you know, my opponent in 2021 missed almost 30% of the votes that were taken in the state legislature. And so, I mean, if somebody is not willing to only show up 70% of the time, why in the world should we rehire them and send them back to the state legislature? Thank you.
My record while I was on the city council was pretty clear in my ability to work with both bipartisan and collaborative ways. I worked with both parties on lobbying for flood protection and other issues important to our communities. You know, citizens elect senators to represent them and make decisions for them. I think they expect us to listen to them, communicate issues to them, and use their expertise and personal experiences to help make their decisions. You never know what might come up in a state legislature in terms of what the issue might be. So in the end, you have to be comfortable with how people make decisions. Now, when I ran for city council the very first time, I had one campaign promise, and I still only have really one campaign promise. And that is to look at both sides of an issue, evaluate it, make sure that I listen to the people that I'm representing, and provide them with the best decision I possibly can. That hasn't changed, it never will be, it never will, it's always the way I am, it's just me. I'm not gonna change. I'm gonna be objective about my decision making, and you can count on that. I promise to be that way throughout my opportunity. If you should choose to elect me on November 8th, then I'd like to have your vote. Thank you.
I want to respond to an accusation by my opponent that is not accurate. He may not know that. In 2021, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, advanced prostate cancer, and this was during the legislative session. I had surgery. I was excused by the minority leader, the Speaker of the House, and the Chief Clerk in order to have surgery and to recover from that surgery at home. So this was in the closing weeks of the legislative session. So I was not able to cast my votes on the floor, but each and every vote on every bill and every amendment, and even procedural amendments, I cast my vote that day with affidavit and writing in the Iowa House. Those are recorded in the House Journal. I'm not sure that Barrett is aware of that, but his accusation is false. I have not missed a single vote.
And with that, we conclude our forum. Let's thank the candidates for their presence. Wonderful. Well, welcome, and now I can say good afternoon. So, good afternoon, and thank you for attending the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. Today's forum is for House District 83, House District 84, and Senate District 42. So, with that, I would like to just introduce myself for a moment. I am Karen Lewis. I am the Secretary of the League of Women Voters and moderating today's discussion. Since its founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. Through its mission, the League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences policies through education and advocacy outreach to voters. Today's forum is part of our voter education outreach. And we are very happy to have all of the candidates here. We're invited today, all candidates from all parties. And representing House District 83, we have Chris Knoll. Cindy Golding was not available today. House District 84, we have Sarah Yedlick. Thomas Gerhold, we did not unfortunately receive a reply from our invitation. And then for Senate District 43, we have all three candidates. We have Bruce Gardner. I'm sorry, I apologize. That is a typo on my part, 42. And we have, so Bruce gave a wave, Charlie McClintock, and Jessica Wiskis. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, candidates, for being here during a busy campaign season. We appreciate your attendance. We did take submission of questions through our website in advance, and we encourage all of our audience members to participate here today by submitting questions on either the yellow or blue slips of paper. Our question sorters are right up here, and we have staff around the room here to pick up any questions that you might have for us. As I mentioned, folks, 90 seconds for all replies, and since we are about 45 minutes, let's just jump into it and get started. So I am going to actually have opening statements begin with Sarah this morning. And you guys, those mics are on, so just kind of share them amongst yourself. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this, and thank you to all that are here, both in person and virtually today. I am Sarah Yedlick, and I'm running for House District 84 to represent Benton and portions of Lynn County. I was born and raised on Family Farm in Benton, and that's where I chose to raise my own children. I'm in my 24th year of teaching and have served on the Board of Educational Examiners for the past 8 years as a teacher leader. As an Iowan and a veteran teacher, I understand the needs to invest in our communities and the importance of keeping the best and the brightest here in our state. Now more than ever, we need fresh ideas at the State House for economic growth, world-class education, and jobs that pay well. Iowa can become even stronger, but we're going to need to be innovative and forward-thinking at our state capitol. As a result of the conversations that I have had with the citizens of House District 84, I am more convinced than ever that the key to Iowa's future success lies in providing high-quality education for every child, keeping our small family farm operations thriving, supporting small businesses as they are the heart of our rural communities, and healthcare options that are available to everyone, regardless of their income or identity.
Hello, and I echo her thanks for everyone who's attending today and for the women voters for putting this on. I am Chris Knoll. I am running for House District 83. That is rural and small town Lynn County. One of the first things people asked me when I said I was doing this was, why are you running? Are you insane? And I said, no, I'm not insane. I'm running because the average Iowan matters. And I think there's a distortion about who the average Iowan is. 50.3% of Iowa is women. The average Iowan age is 38. There's a gap between what we see when we go to look at the legislator which is male dominant, less than 30% women, older individuals, retired individuals, when the average Iowan is a working mother. So that's why I'm running, because the average Iowan matters.
Thanks so much to the League of Women Voters for inviting us here today. My name is Jessica Wiskus, and I'm running for State Senate in District 42. It was never my intention to become involved as a political candidate, but sometimes there's an issue that's so fundamental, someone needs to step up. And that's what I'm doing. I'm standing up for my communities. So as you know, I've been organizing since last November to stop eminent domain for the private CO2 pipeline corporations. And this isn't an issue about Democrats or Republicans or independents. It's an issue about Iowans. It's about our constitutional rights. It's about the safety of our communities. And it's about a true path toward mitigating climate change. And so sometimes I know it feels like corporations and political interests have worked to divide all of us. But what I have learned through my work in my community is that there is so much more that unites us than that divides us in Iowa. Iowans want a Des Moines that respects us, doesn't bully us. Iowans want fairness, they want dignity. Iowans value courage and action, not excuses. And so I am sitting here today as a candidate for all of you, and the courage that I have to run for office doesn't just come from me, it comes from my whole community, and that's what I will bring with me to Des Moines.
Testa. Hello, thank you. I'm Charlie McClintock. I'll be running for District 42 Senate as well. I do want to thank the League of Women Voters. They do such an excellent job. I think seeing all the candidates up here is a testament to how well they do and everything they put together. So I've been to several forums, and I can tell you these are not easy to put together, to organize, and to put out to so many people. And I know I'm burning some of my time, but I want to emphasize that I've been to many of these and viewed them, and the amount of work that they do to make them available to such a large forum, especially online, is a testament to how much work that they do for the folks. So thank you again so much for that. I'm running for, like I said, for Senate. That is pretty much the rural areas of Linn County and most of Benton County, except for one little northwest chunk. So I am an existing House rep. My term will be up this year. And because of redistricting, we lost Senator Zumbaugh. He will be redistricting to the north, and the senator in Benton County, Senator Driscoll, she got redistricted to the south. So it was one of those things where we had a conversation, and it looked best that if I was going to stay in Linn County, that I would move over into the Senate seat. So that's the main purpose of why I'm moving over Chambers into the Senate. But anyway, just want to give you a quick snapshot of why I'm running for Senate 42. I look forward to answering the questions today and answering more things for you and about the race. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Bruce Gardner here. I'm running for Senate 42, which includes the majority of Benton County and all rural Linn County. So it would be accepting of the Cedar Rapids metro area. The reason I'm running is because I've got a, this is on, right? All right. Oh, I apologize. I want to make sure that everybody knows who I am. I'm an individual who's had strong contact with the rural area. I was born and raised in the Benton County Farm, which once became Farm of the Year, highly conservation oriented. Due to that, I went into agricultural businesses, ran those, including commodity business, market research firm, ag oriented, also worked for the USDA, conservation oriented, in about 5 offices. More recently, I ran the water quality grant by the Secretary of Agriculture on the Cedar River. This is very important, especially today on online Cedar Rapids Gazette, mentioned the amount of nitrates that we have in the Cedar River currently, and it continues to increase, even though we've spent millions and millions of dollars on trying to reduce it. Other issues I've done as an example, clean energy. I brought the electric windmills to the Midwest. Those who don't like the windmills, I could look at you and say, would you rather have them be oil derricks, or would you rather, that's quite all right. I apologize, but I would like to talk to you individually in the future.
Our first question from the audience, we will begin with Chris to respond to, and it is part of the healthcare topic. And this one is, how do you hope to promote or increase, how do you hope to promote or cover the open positions within the healthcare industry that were a result of COVID changes, or open positions this person is acquiring?
So, why I came to Iowa in the first place was to get a nursing degree. I came out Mercy, started as a nursing student, and after about a year and a half decided it wasn't for me. Already back then, and that was 20 plus years ago, there was a nursing shortage. The nursing shortage is not new. It is extremely worse than it was 20 years ago, between individuals retiring, individuals leaving the field because of what happened with COVID and the stress put on them. But this is not a new issue. It comes from brain drain, that process of educated individuals leaving Iowa to go to places that are more livable, where they can make more money. 20 years ago, it would have cost me about $100 grand to get a nursing degree from Mount Mercy. It's about $25,000 a year. That cost hasn't gone down. So, you want more nurses? Pay them more, make educational more affordable, and make Iowa more green.
Thanks very much. So, when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Iowa, which was a while ago, I was able to pay for it all myself through scholarships, through working as a waitress at Sullivan Tavern, just south of Lisbon, if you know that place, saving pennies, pinching everything, but making it through, and I made it through without debt. That was a possibility for somebody in my generation. We've seen that change for the next generations. And I so strongly believe in Iowa as a place that supports education, that supports opportunity for everyone to move down a pathway to find their dream and their way of helping their own communities. And so we need to be investing more in our higher education as well as our secondary education, but our higher education as well, to keep those expenses down for everyone here who wants to make a difference in his or her community and stay in our communities and work with the people who are here, especially in our rural communities. I know that we have a secret ingredient in Iowa, and that's our community strength. It's the way we stand together and orient our lives around something that is meaningful, helping our neighbors. And I am certain that if we open up pathways for more of our young people to be able to gain an education here and be debt-free from it, they can afford to stay here and come back to our rural areas to work in healthcare.
Okay, so we've addressed this a little bit in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, in the last 2 years for the time that I was there, and I know plenty of people have done things before that, but post-pandemic, we've had to kind of amplify things to compensate for these losses, and it's not only an issue within healthcare, it's an issue across the board. And I kind of tell folks, I use the acronym ECHO, the education, the health, the compensation and affordable housing. And I'll hit them very quickly because I know I don't have much time, but the education piece, we try to do programs that start early. I agree that it needs to be in higher education as well, but we need to start early in the high school level. And that gets those folks not only their credit that they need to get into the high school level, but it also helps them with things like their schedule and goals and gets them ready to be successful into their collegiate careers. And then when we get in and talk about healthcare, that's not only, boy, I'm going to be tight here, that's not only talking about their life as far as their health, but it's the health span, because workers are staying in the work field so much longer.
lifespan is not as big an issue as health span and keeping everybody healthy to be able to do that, and we're looking at programs to be able to support that. And then compensation in the form of living wage, but also that reward to compensation to be able to, and I'm out of time, but anyway, I'd like to also talk about the housing issue, but of trying to keep people within the state for affordable housing. But yes, there are programs we're trying to do to be able to support that. Thank you.
Barb, you remind me of watching Jeopardy. Dee-da, you know, 90 seconds isn't enough, obviously, for any of us to contact. Karen, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure, sorry. The question was on healthcare, and how do you hope to promote covering the losses of the healthcare workers that we experienced during COVID?
Obviously, and I've given this stance before, but obviously to me, and it should be to all of us, women and children's health care is a priority. And if we're going to broach the entire subject, that I believe that availability to abortion as needed is important. But on top of that, when we start talking about health care, we talk about the aging of this state. And when we talk about the aging of the state, we also talk about the increasing amount of need of health care. As an example, during caucus period, I and another individual promoted the idea that since it's so far to distance to travel for veterans, that we need to have a credit card issued for them so they can go in their local clinic and it could be swiped, and then of course that could be taken out of the Veterans Affairs situation rather than traveling 200 miles for something. Available health care, if you're in Northwest Iowa, means you go to another state. If you're in Southwest Iowa, you go to another state. This is the difficulty that we've got. We are allowing individuals who don't have medical degrees, as in MD or whatever, and we're allowing people that have PAs and other situations in order to issue prescription meds and things like this. The idea, though, is our health care needs to be more rural, and it's isolated, unfortunately, because of population situations. So we need to address that if at all possible. Thank you, Barb.
We are getting to the point where we are at the state of a healthcare crisis and education crisis, and we have to do more to do better for the people of Iowa. We have to make it enticing for people to go into the field, making sure that at the collegiate level and even before that, we offer mentorship programs to get our best and brightest into those positions, making it affordable so they can still go to school and pay their mortgage, pay their rent, pay for groceries. We also have to make sure that once they're in that field, that they're taken care of, that they are provided with an affordable, that they are provided with resources, a financial package that is given to them that is able to feed their families. We have in our rural communities a need for quality healthcare professionals. It is not something that's going to get fixed overnight, but we have to be able to provide and entice our best and brightest out into our rural communities so that our rural citizens can get quality and affordable health care, both for their children, their children's children. This is a problem and an issue that we're going to need to continue to focus on.
All right, our next question, we will begin with Jessica, and the topic is environment. What state laws are needed surrounding the topic of water quality here in Iowa?
Okay, so let me begin quickly. The environment is one of the major reasons why I raised my hand to run for this position. As you know, the CO2 pipelines are basically a permission slip for the fossil fuel industry to continue producing its emissions as they have been, and numerous scientists have come out and unveiled this for what it truly is. In terms of the issues that we're facing in water quality in Iowa, I like to think about our challenges as actually being opportunities. Because if we want to get serious about addressing climate change, we do have to address carbon dioxide, And we do have to address water quality. And one of the ways we can do this is actually through regenerative farming techniques. So I'm talking about cover crops, I'm talking about no-till, and I'm talking about the restoration of wetlands, saturation buffers, and prairie strips. Did you know that 1 acre of prairie can sequester 5 tons of carbon dioxide a year? We have ways to invest for our farmers and our landowners to be able to take the steps in order to mitigate both of these problems, but we've got to be careful that we allow our individuals here in Iowa to be doing it and not simply out-of-state corporate executives. Make the investments here amongst our people. We can do this in Iowa.
Okay, thank you. We've addressed this, and me specifically, in the last couple of years. In the House, I sat on the Agricultural Committee as well as Natural Resources. And so we are continually briefed on, especially in natural resources, and some in agriculture as well, but especially natural resources from the regents. And they'll come in and they'll give us their current initiatives that they're working on and the things that they're doing, as well as other folks from the state level of what they're working on for water quality. I can tell you with great confidence that the colleges, the universities are doing great work to try to not only study the problem, but reduce issues not only with nitrates and other issues for agriculture in Iowa. The problem is not as simple as what you would think of with just regular runoffs and things like that. It's a problem to our north, when I say to the north, because the way that the river basins work and the way they come into the state, we also run into issues with everything that is upstream that comes into Iowa. So it's actually more than just an Iowa problem, and we're working with our partner states as well to be able to address that. Also, within the agriculture system, we work with our farming communities, our farm bureaus, and our corn growers and things like that to address the issue of fertilization and the chemicals that are used to try to keep the soil protected. And then, if I have time, I'll come back to you. If the solar issue comes up, I'll be able to address that as well.
Karen, could you again repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry, repeat the question? Apologize. What state laws are needed surrounding the topic of water quality?
Now we get back to finally what the question's about. Directing specifically state laws. Currently, and I've been in contact with Dr. Mallarino, who wrote the nutrient reduction strategy. We've long discussed this situation. Coe College is an example. The chemistry department does sampling on local tributaries to find out what's going on with that. We're talking about laws rather than voluntary situations. When you write a law, that means regulations. When you talk about regulations, then you talk about impact. Right now, Iowa is the largest corn producer in the United States, and over 60% or nearly 60% of what we do goes to ethanol. The remainder, of course, will go into livestock, but from there, then you have affluent, you have nitrate poisoning, you have situations. Iowa's also the largest contributor in the nation to the hypoxia in the Gulf. And we have this voluntary situation. Unfortunately, when you talk about laws, you talk about regulation. There are point and non-point. Farmers being non-point, and of course it's been addressed with saturated buffers and things that I have put in for years and years, but the other side is points. And that's when we talk about meat packing, we talk about poultry, CAFOs, we talk about situations that are directly affecting it. If those are going to be a situation that we have to look at, then you're talking about regulation. It is something that has to be addressed.
We have a responsibility to Iowans to make sure that our waters and our waterways are kept clean. As a farmer's daughter, I would work collaboratively with the corn growers of Iowa, the Farm Bureau, and a variety of other experts in that field to make sure that the laws are not hurting Iowan farmers and hurting Iowans. But as I talk in my classroom with my students every day, we talk about the need to protect our waters and make sure that that piece of litter isn't ending up in our waterways. So it's a local issue, but it's an individual issue that we have to take care of this planet that we are on. So creating a law, yes, that's fine, but it is truly an individual responsibility that we all make sure that what we are doing does not harm the environment that needs to sustain us for many, many years to come.
So, water quality is such a complex topic because it does factor both state and regional requirements and cooperating. We have a Department of Natural Resources. They have done their work. They are being underfunded, so we need to make sure they are funded. And then we need to actually listen to the experts that we have retained and look at the regulations we have now, strengthen those that need to be strengthened, and yeah, there's maybe some cases where some need to be retooled or reworked, so that they are not causing undue stress to individual and small businesses. But there also probably need to be more oversight on some of the larger farming groups, some of the more corporate farming groups, the meat packing, because my experience with Iowa Waters comes from real estate and dealing with multifamily properties, even rural areas. So I have an idea of how much it costs for a small business to have its own private sewer packing facility or lagoon. It is an expense, but some of these businesses may need to look at that in order to help protect the water table.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the next question will begin with Charlie, and the question is on the topic of housing. And what can the state do to increase the supply of affordable housing in Iowa?
Yeah, so this has also come up in the last couple of years, especially the last year. I'll tell you, because my time is limited, I want to touch on two areas on this. One, we found that keeping people in Iowa is directly related to housing. So you have your family. Let's say that and I'll use Lynn County as an example. So my kids, both of them went to Kirkwood. My daughter got her first degree there. My son did 2+2, where he got his gen eds there, and then went on to the University of Iowa. But they wanted to both stay in Iowa and in the area. Well, what are the motivations behind that? Well, one, they want to be around their family, and they want to have their holidays, and they want us to be together in case they're with issues and their kids and things like that. And then also, they want to be able to live and work in the community, and they want to be able to live here. They have to have affordable housing. So what can we do in the legislature to make that possible? Well, we can help them with tax credits and incentives, and we can also give them, locally, we can encourage that through housing credits as well, and we will be doing that, and we have done that through taxation credits. The other thing I want to talk on quickly is with mobile homes. This is going to be a major issue that we're going to have to deal with, because out-of-state companies are coming in, they're buying up these mobile home parks, and they're raising the rates incredibly that are hurting people on fixed incomes. I hope I have time to come back to that. It's a major issue, and we will address it.
Whenever I did economic development, and I've done quite a bit of it, there's always this concern, what we want to do is we want to get jobs, all right? If you get jobs in a small community, what do you need? You need infrastructure, you need to provide positive reinforcement, you need education, you need something. But basically, immediately, you need housing, because if you have an economic development situation, you're going to bring an influx of people into your area. Since we're in a rural situation, we do have a lot of small towns, but none of them are able or can adapt or address an immediate need for housing in a situation like that. The second part of it is, it depends upon what you bring in. It depends on the amount of income that will offset that housing. So you're talking about low affordable housing for an influx of people or ones who are already there. There's a situation, as Mr. McClinic had just talked about, with tax rebates and other funding situations. What you need to do is you need to immediately address it, as in the populace is located here for the purpose of, say there's a manufacturing company that comes in. you need to plan that housing immediately with everything else that you're doing. And that's part of, not separate from, but it has to be immediate that way. The other side of it is that we need to ensure that everyone has adequate housing, capability of that.
Regarding the topic that Charlie brought up regarding our mobile homes, I have talked to voters in my district that have been, I'm going to say victim to that. Out-of-state companies have come in, purchased the mobile home park, increased the rates, aren't fixing what is currently wrong, especially after the derecho, and these people are living in subpar conditions. We have to set regulations for these out-of-state companies to make sure that they are held accountable for what they purchase. Along with providing affordable housing, we have to make sure that we have jobs that are able to sustain these families. If they come here for an affordable house, we have to make sure they are provided with a suitable income. So as we make sure that our both rural and urban environments have affordable housing, we have to make sure the jobs are there to sustain them.
So as said, I work in real estate. First of all, I was on a call the other day listening to local board of real estate agents talking about how they were so excited. A builder was building affordable housing units in and around Cedar Rapids. It were going to be two-bedroom houses starting in the low 275s. That is not affordable. Here's the flip side of that. I work in real estate, and I work in manufactured housing. So the deals that they're talking about, I'm intimately know those deals. I know that one of the parks that was bought in Iowa City a few years ago, I know the owner at the time was a local owner who was doing nothing to improve the property and had plans within 5 to 10 years to kick everybody out. An out-of-state owner came in, out-of-state buyer came in, said, hey, we want to buy the property. The guy said, nope, not unless you match prices for it would be for commercial value in 10 to 15 years. The out-of-state owner buyer did it. He saved 300 housing units. But to do that, he did have to increase the pricing. He raised the rent by about $75 to $100. It happens. It stinks. But that was 300 housing units that didn't disappear. 300 housing units that went from being $150 a month to $250 a month. That's still a pretty good deal.
Thanks very much. So first of all, I just want to echo 2 points that have already been made, and one is from my colleague here, Charlie McClintock, who has spoken about what the state legislature can do to help people in terms of grants and funding for affordable housing. And I would add to that, we really need to be looking at grants that could be made available for the rehabilitation of many of our older homes in our small towns throughout our rural district. They are crying out to be brought into the 21st century, and we know that energy costs are only rising, and these houses have to be brought up to par, and we can help with that in the Iowa State Legislature, and that is a win-win for everybody in terms of, again, energy independence and lowering our carbon footprint and making more housing affordable for others who will come into our small towns. Secondly, I want to echo what Sarah said about the mobile home parks, because I have heard this as well. And I think what's happening right now and what we have to be concerned about is the fact that our Iowa State Legislature seems to be, more responsive to larger out-of-state corporations than to the needs of the actual citizens who are here. We've got to have voices in Des Moines who can advocate for us and point out the social justice issues that are really taking place in our communities right here, right now. And I know I only have a couple more seconds, so I want to point to one more thing. We also have to think in our rural district about the commute and the expense of the commute. How can we bring more jobs to where the housing is located?
We did get started a few minutes late, so I would like to ask one more question. And that topic is on education, so I appreciate it. Stay a few minutes longer so we can get through these. The last question, as I mentioned, was on education, and we will start with Bruce to answer this one. And support or oppose the use of vouchers for education?
Just so curious that this question would come up, especially after the article in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, where Emily was very specific about pointing out a comment that I had made on vouchers. The situation that I look at is when I was in high school, we were #1 educated in the nation. By the time I became an adult, we were in the top 3 to 5 with Wisconsin, Minnesota. We now range somewhere between 19th and 27th. Now, I'm not saying that our education system has failed. What I'm saying is that everyone else seems to be passing us. Why do we have that problem? Why is there a situation like that? I don't have any issue with private schools. As a matter of fact, I attended private colleges. The situation that I'm wondering about is if we are looking to have private college or private schooling answer the question or sustain our education system, why is it less than what our public education system is right now? Don't we have a way to improve our public education system that's tax supported? And if that's so, why can't it become as good as the private schools? So I'm looking at a situation where are we doing a payoff to some political situation that somebody wants us to go to vouchers for private institutions? Or should we be looking at more effective situation with our tax dollars towards our public education?
Public funds should remain in our public schools. As an educator for the past 24 years, I see every one of my public educators, my fellow workers, that are working diligently, day, night, many hours, putting in time for your children, the children of Iowa. I live in a rural district, and we don't have the option of private schools in many of our areas. So if we take those funds and put them towards vouchers, our public schools in our rural areas especially are going to continue to be underfunded. They are not going to be able to provide the educational opportunities that they need to be enticing to people coming from outside. So what's going to happen is our businesses aren't going to stay. The economic decline of our rural communities is going to continue, and the urban-rural divide is going to become even greater. So if we take the money for the vouchers out of our public schools, it is going to harm our rural communities and the economic sustainability of them. So I am against vouchers for here in Iowa.
So I am a mixed graduate. I spent 6 years public school, 6 years private school. And I can tell you firsthand, no private school kid needs voucher money. We don't. We have scholarships, we do fundraising. Private schools can raise their money. As the wife of a teacher, I can tell you that when it comes to expenses, when my husband needs something for his classroom, first thing he comes to me and goes, well, should I buy it myself or should we try to get it out of the school budget? And I have to say, well, is it something you want to take with you when you leave? Because that really has come down to it. Is this a supply that you know you're going to want to use for the rest of your career or not? The schools are just not funded. We don't have a surplus. We have a dragon board that's been caused because we've been underfunding schools and underfunding state departments for decades. Leave public money for public good. Public schools are a public utility. Leave them alone.
Thanks. I am completely opposed to the voucher program for the state of Iowa. So some of you know about that closed-door meeting that happened in Linn-Mar where Governor Reynolds passed out some handouts. Turns out those are from a partisan political agenda organization in Washington, D.C., led by a politician from North Carolina, and it really does not fit the character or the tradition of Iowans. In Iowa, we believe in the public good. We believe in our children and equal opportunities. So the public good It's just like the highways and the bridges that we drive on. We all invest in this because we want them to be safe for every single Iowan. We all, similarly for the schools, we invest in this because it's about the greater good of all Iowans. And so we say to our children, I believe in you. I believe in your opportunity. I believe in supporting your achievement. And I believe in you finding a way to make your life meaningful. That's what the public school system does for us. It's a common good. We must all fully support it. Thank you.
Okay, so if you've heard of me, you know I was a no on vouchers. And I live with that decision, but it was an easy decision, and I'll also tell you why. Because when I got into office, I said 3 things would drive my decisions. One, I'd vote my district, and if my district didn't have an opinion, I would vote the way I wanted to because I'm a member of the district. And then third, I would vote with the caucus. Well, this was an easy one because the district clearly didn't want vouchers, okay? So I was a no on that issue. And if you followed my career, especially last June, you know I lived with those consequences. So moving forward then to schools, and my colleagues have talked about the funding for schools. Well, when we get into the legislature, we usually go in around later in the first week of January, I think January 10th this year. And you'll know that we need to pass the supplemental aid very quickly, or SSA, usually within the first 30 days. So in February this year, we ran it. It was an increase, about 174 million, I believe. I was a no on that. It wasn't sufficient. I think Representative Stade was here earlier. He proposed another $5 million to the increase in that, and that was voted down as well. So I want to be clear that I support the public school system. My district supports it. They want to see the public schools properly funded. If you're not going to properly fund the public school systems for everything they need, it's a hard sell to turn around then and say they're not giving everything they need, so you need to move the kids out to go to other options with vouchers. That's just how it is.
In the interest of time, we're actually going to move on to closing statements, but just a reminder to our audience, your vote is your voice, and we encourage you to vote on the 8th of November. If you can't vote in person, please see one of us, or on the table over there, there's information about absentee ballots and in-person early voting. So thank you. The way it all worked out, we are back to you for our opening statement, or closing statement, excuse me.
Thank you to League of Women Voters again, and thank you to all that are here today, both in person and virtually. My name is Sarah Yedlick again, and I am a candidate who will listen to the voters. You can see that my opponent is not here today, and I want to be the person for the people that will listen and take your concerns into consideration as I go to the state capitol. So I truly hope that on November 8th, or before if you're voting early, that you will cast your ballot for Sarah Yedlick, because I am here for you and I'm here to listen. Thank you.
Again, thank you for listening to all of us ramble for 45 minutes. We appreciate it. We appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to ask you not necessarily to vote for me. What I'm going to ask you to do is go out and vote your SWAN. SWAN stands for Sleep Well at Night. I want you to go out, and when you go ready to vote, I want you to think about the future you see and the people running and what is going to let you sleep well at night. And then I want you to vote for that, because that's what matters.
Thanks again to the League of Women Voters for organizing this wonderful event. We really appreciate it. So those of you who know me or know my family know that we're not usually involved in politics in this kind of open way, but we have always been involved in our community, always, over multiple generations. That's who I am. I am volunteering every single week in my community. I want to make a difference where I can, because I know that the things that are most important in our lives are not the possessions that we own, but the things that we share with one another. That's respect, that's dignity, that's generosity, vulnerability, and strength. That's what we share with one another. And I want to close with a parting story here about recently when I was down at the Linn County Board of Supervisors with a bunch of neighbors, and we were there to talk about our safety concerns about, supercritical CO2. And I met with a woman whom I hadn't met before down there. And she came up to me. She said, "Oh, you're Jessica Wiskus." I said, "Yes." And she said, "I hear you're running for office as a Democrat." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I've been a Republican all my life, but I'm voting for you." And I think that I'm voting for you is actually, I'm voting for us. Voting for our community, voting for who we are and what we believe in. Thank you.
Okay, let me say that I want to paint a pretty picture, I guess, for what's going to happen next legislative session. I know that there's a lot of issues, not a lot, but a couple issues that are going to come up this year that are tough, that are going to be where there's no good solution. And sometimes as a country, we get ourselves into that position where we have to make a decision where there's no good solution. And we're going to face a couple of those this year. It's going to come up in session, it's going to come up relatively early, where no matter what, your legislators, regardless of who you pick, are going to be faced with a tough decision where either side, whichever way they go, is not going to go well as far as either public opinion or whatever the solution may be. But that the vast majority of what we're getting ready to do is going to be good. We're going to do great things for the people of Iowa. We're going to do good things for the economy. We're going to do good things in tax relief, for housing. I've seen the proposals that are being put together, and they're good. Every year I put together what I'm going to do to run for legislation. I'm up to about somewhere between 12 and 15 bills right now. Every one of them are based upon what people are asking me to put together, either through the government or private folks or people or in business. All of it, or even education, all of it is good. And that's what your legislators should be doing for you, and that's what we're putting together. And I know my colleagues are doing the same thing. So not everything is a dim picture out there. Your folks are working for you.
To end the session, I immediately want to thank Karen and Barb and Sarah for setting this up and having the League of Women Voters offer this platform for us. It's not often, but only or seldom in Iowa is a situation where you can actually meet the candidates. I guess the caucus system still is a good deal. We're here today to present our ideas on what we're doing, what we want to get done. But I'm not going to talk about platitudes, how we're just a bunch of great people that we already know. I'm not going to talk about our communities. I'm going to talk about better than not a good solution. We're here to establish the purpose of this election. I'm going to run on clean water and soil health, clean renewable energy, a new future for rural communities. As a matter of fact, I talked to Secretary Vilsack last month about it, and I've got a meeting in 2 weeks with the State Director of the USDA Rural Development on this. And also education for the future. STEM, magnet, all these required, resounding, important, fundamental things that we need just so we can have a good, purposeful situation here and we can extend the life and value of the state of Iowa. But not only that, so we can improve it and place ourselves above, at least equal to. Thank you, Barb.
Well, that concludes today's candidate forum. I'd like, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, to thank you, our audience, for being here, and you, the candidates, for being present today. Thank you all.